Edition of Digital Money 2023, brought to you by Payment Council of India and Lyra Network India, powered by Razorpay, Gold Partners Visa and Amazon Pay, Silver Partner PayPal, FidiPay, In Solutions Global, Transcorp and Paypoint, Bronze Partner Plural by Pine Labs. Hope you all had a great lunch with peers and had a great networking time. Now, moving ahead with the next session on growth of PPI and what to expect, we have Ms. Neha Gupta, Amazon, as a moderator, and may I request all the speakers on the stage: Ayan Agarwal, Transcorp International; Khilan Harya, Razorpay; Sanjeev Kumar, Spice Money; Sanjeev Pandey, Omni Card; and Satyajit Khade, In Solution Global Limited.
Oh, super. So we have the quorum and very excited to host this session. This is the first time that I'm being a moderator to the session. So looking forward to an interesting conversation. And the topic, I think, is a very relevant one for, of course, all of us who brings cumulatively 20 plus years of experience of working in the PPI space and have seen the growth and multiple disruption I think this sector has done. I think in principle, I think we were chatting just a while earlier. I think we've seen three phases of growth on PPIs. The phase wherein from 2009 to 2014, the second phase, which is 2014, encompassing demonetization to 2020, and then 2020 and now. So with that, I think of course, during this journey, I think we've seen PPI is scaling from 30 million odd transactions to 6.8 billion in 2022, which is quite a scale in itself. Of course, I think it's come with its sets of own ups and downs, whether it is relevant in view of UPI, in view of digital rupee, in view of many things that I think have happened in the ecosystem. So I think this forum, as a forum, we'll try and touch upon what's the growth story ahead. And I think we have an esteemed panel to kind of talk about that. So opening up the conversation, Ayan, maybe, I think, what have you seen as growth drivers for the sector, and specifically in the times to come ahead? I think, where are your bets?
Sure. So I think there are three specific things that have kind of, driven the growth in the PPI sector. First is the regulatory empowerment, right? So when the PPI licenses first started coming out, there weren't too many things that you could do with it. As the regulators were kind enough to kind of trust us more, and we built that trust in the ecosystem, they've allowed us to do more and more, right? That came in from interoperability with cards, thereafter UPI, issuance to foreign nationals, and so on and so forth. So that's, I think, one very specific thing that has really driven the growth. The second aspect is from the network standpoint, right? So UPI, when it first came out, it wasn't that globally adopted, but now we see UPI is kind of surpassing all the digital payment methods. Of course, the card acceptance, the NCMC, mobility, transit, all of that has kind of really enabled it. So network gets the other middle, and third is obviously the users, right? So the foundation of this organization, PCI, internet and mobile, just having internet and mobile access to the Indian population all over India. That's, I think, another third aspect that has really driven the growth. So all three of these things. Now, quickly touching upon the future. So there was a recent Reserve Bank survey that said 58% of people in India have not done a digital payment. So it's pretty evident that while India has adapted digital payments, but there's a lot of work left to do in Bharat, right? So I do believe that more than half the Indian population has not done a digital payment. So how do we kind of get them onto the ecosystem?
Maybe Sanjeev, I think you've had a good experience of working with rural customers, and I think to extend the thought that I think Ayan brought, that 58% customers have not done, or users have not done a digital transaction. Do you want to share your insights on what are the drivers, what are you observing in the PPI landscape?
Sure, thanks Neha. Good afternoon everyone. Before I answer that question, I work for a company called Spice Money. We are a rural fintech platform. We have a network of 1.2 million Spice Money merchants, whom we call Spice Money Adhikaris. And what do? They are in the business of providing assisted services to roughly 2.5 crore consumers every month on basic banking, payments, collection, and any other digital services. Coming to this point, we're sitting, I genuinely believe that there is a resurgence of PPI as an instrument. And I don't know how many people are very excited about it, but personally, from a rural context, I feel this is a very, very big opportunity that we're sitting on. very excited, and question is why why are we very excited? So my answers are as follows, that if I keep the largest theme that we are, as a country, are on of digital adoption, and that's the biggest, largest theme, then my fundamental belief and hypothesis is that the next set of rural UPI consumers will come from rural India. From a 25 crore consumers today, if you want to increase that to the 75 crore, it is going to come from rural India. And then when you go deeper into it, then you ask this question is, why is it that, or what is preventing a 25 crore to move to 75 crore is not because of the lack of any products. I think the products that you and I use today in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, urban India is the same, is an absolutely brilliant product, and that's the reason UPI has grown the way. But fundamentally believe that there's an infrastructure problem in rural India which prohibits the usage of UPI adoption. And if I were to give you top 4 reasons, number 1 is because, like you and I, if today want to activate a UPI application, you need a bank account, you need a debit card. Debit card रूरल इंडिया में नहीं है. अगर है तो पिन चाहिए, पिन नहीं है, और है तो भूल गया हूँ. That's the first problem statement. Second problem statement is रूरल इंडिया अकाउंट एक ही है, पैसे उसी में है, डर है. Very reluctant to use link an account digitally. There is a psychology. You and I will not understand here. When you go down to a village, when you go down to a block, you probably will relate this more. 2. Third, most of the accounts are in public sector banks, and not only public sector, cooperative banks, Grameen banks. They're not technology well advanced on UPI. The failure is very high, even if they're enabled on UPI. Even if a rural consumer wants to, where does he do? Fourth, again a very big point. For us sitting here, the source of money is digital. मुझे salary मिलता, account में आता, मैं move करता हूँ. Rural India, the source of money is still cash. It's very easy to say, but moving cash from a cash to a digital convert करना आसान नहीं है. Where do I go? I go to a 25 kilometers to a bank branch, to a ATM to move that money into digital. Not easy. Now these are big reasons why it prohibits even people who want to. We believe with PPI, and we want to, hopefully we'll launch the product very soon. We're standing on a unique opportunity to take care of that, wherein there is a rural consumer who wants to now download a PPI instrument as a wallet, as a digital account. Easy activation. There is no debit card. Number 2. Hopefully with the network that we have, you want to load cash to digital, do it at our network. And the biggest, what turned this opportunity according to me, is PPI interoperability. The fact that the instrument is now interoperability, I can pay with like a Google Pay and this scan and pay, it just makes it as powerful as any other UPI app. I think that is the opportunity. So we believe this instrument has a potential, subject to players like us and many other who can execute it, and that's a subject. I think you can create the next wave of UPI consumers in India.
Great, thanks Sanjeev for that perspective. Maybe I think we'll go over to you, Satyajit. I think you've recently kind of gotten your PPI license. Of course, I think the interest continues, and we're seeing in our panel, I think 2 of us have had the license in the last 1.5 years. So what is the sectors or use cases are you visualizing which kind of really is exciting for your organization?
So hello everyone, good afternoon. Before actually coming to the sectors that we are going to focus on, there are multiple factors, entities who are actually promoting digital payments and PPI growth. One is of course the government and the regulator. Then there are marketplaces, like entities like marketplace, who are actually wanting to enhance the customer experience by, because payments is not their core offering to the customer for a marketplace. They want to actually give a single checkout offering to the customer. So that is where they are trying to promote PPI. Then there are industry needs like transit, toll collection, where the industry itself is demanding it. And then there are certain sectors where the fintechs are trying to find out a way where they can actually bring in some revenue model and generate revenue for themselves. For us, the initial strategy that we are focusing on will be our education sector, where apart from like bringing in the new innovations for that particular segment, we are also trying to focus on digital payment literacy, where it is not only about how to perform a digital transaction, but what are the other life cycles of a digital transactions. In case if there's a complaint that the customer wants to raise. So we want to inculcate that particular, uh, behavior or this thing into the customer and at a very early stage. And that's where initially we may focus on education sector, but then of course transit is something that is a very huge demand that is coming up with the metros and this thing being set up. So that's what our strategy is.
Thank you. Thanks, Satyajit. Moving over to you, Kilan, I think as the Razorpay, I think you've also seen very significant interest picking up in the PPI space, and I think you also started operationalizing your license. Do you want to share some of your experience of what you are observing and where you see the future in PPIs?
Yeah, and I think from two perspectives, right? I think Razorpay has been, aggregating, PPIs for a long time. And I think pre-2016, that was the most convenient, pre-UPI, most convenient way to make a transaction. And public wallets, the large wallets, the 7, 8, 10 players more and more started coming, were scaling and, overall increasing the total addressable market online. Of course, UPI came and started solving for convenience, and that problem statement to an extent went away or didn't remain primary. But over the last, I think, 4 or 5 years on acquiring, we're starting to see again a different wave on PPI, where there is now a lot more in-platform, PPI construct that is starting to scale. And on the issuing side, I think as we've entered again over the last 18 months, I think 2-3 avatars we are visualizing. I think first one, I think now more and more businesses are focusing on loyalty. And for loyalty, they want to keep money in the platform while the money is still, regulatory purposes available to be used elsewhere, but it's not really used a lot is what folks have seen. So I think loyalty is becoming a big use case, gift card another. I think for both of those use cases on the issuing side, while we are issuing as an issuer ourselves, also a lot of it co-branded with businesses on the platform already. So I think these two are big trends we are foreseeing to scale PPI amongst a next set of few thousand and potentially lakh of businesses over the next 4 or 5 years.
Got it. Maybe Sanjeev, we'll go over to you. Like, what do you think are the top regulatory challenges or otherwise challenges that we are seeing in the current, while there are growth areas that I think all of us are talking about, whether it is transit, whether it is students as a sector, whether it is, for example, powering loyalty through PPIs, and going to the next 250 million, beyond 250 million customers. What do you think are the top challenges that the PPIs are facing that needs to be dealt with?
I think, hi, good afternoon to everyone, and I think you asked me the most difficult question. If I talk about the opportunities are definitely, everybody in the panel has already given the insights. As you see, and the regulator I see from the regulatory standpoint, the regulator in the country has been very progressive in terms of defining the roadmap of the digital payment landscape in the country. And in the past several years, I have been a banker for 20 years. And thereafter, I started a PPI license company, focusing on the payment, on the holistic payment infrastructure as a payment service provider. I see the biggest challenge today, which the PPI as an industry is facing, is boiling down to right from the onboarding, processes which has to be very carefully, due diligence has to be done across. As we also bring the accessibility of the digital payments on the mobile app, as well as with the seamless, interoperable, prepaid, physical, as well as virtual cards. The transaction monitoring, the prudent risk management in transaction monitoring, given there are specified limits being defined for the gift cards or a travel card. I mean, they are basically loadable, general purpose cards. That's something which is very critical for companies to bring in. At the same time, Satyajit mentioned a very important point, is how you are handling, because the PPI is an account-based relationship. It's similar to what the bank account is. This is where the ownership and the responsibility also lies in how you are managing the grievances as well as solving and resolving the customer queries. So put together, I mean, these would be the more challenging space to work on as you think of scaling the product and the services across different use cases within the industry. In addition to that, I think RBI brought in, along with NPCI, brought in certain enablers which have really transformed the PPI industry. To mention few, I think Ayan talked about the interoperability, and I think that was the redefining moment for the prepaid instrument industry as a whole. Bringing UPI on PPI, I think one of the areas which still can be thought about is to rethink of adding up, the credit on the full KYC PPIs is something which I think is equally prudent, given that KYC norms are properly addressed and the customer due diligence is followed within the KYC guidelines and directions of the regulator. In addition to that, another challenge we face is how we build up a ecosystem which is inclusive in nature, reaching out as Spice Money is doing it, reaching out to the rural areas, but at the same time, touch upon the use cases for the regular customers, where the value of the transaction is reasonably higher, so that it brings a reasonable amount of profitability and the operational capabilities within the operators.
Got it. Sanjeev, so I'm moving to another Sanjeev. Do you want to share your set of challenges as observed in rural, like anything different from what maybe Sanjeev highlighted? Maybe some of us have more urban context, but any nuance, any challenge, anything that you feel needs to be done differently for really the India or the Bharat that Ayan referred to?
Yeah. So I'll put both challenges and opportunity at the same time, because I think that's both sides of the pendulum that we struggle with or we look at. One is, when I talk about, if I were to extrapolate what I spoke about, the opportunity, I think it's very important to call out, and I don't know if we understand this well, when everybody speaks about the growth in every consumption and in every economic indicator in rural India, I don't know if we understand who is driving this change. And if you go deeper, you'll realize the segment that's driving this change is the youth. It is the youth in rural India. There is a CTO in every house. It is that young boy or a girl who's getting digitally more savvy, who's ambitious, who's aspirational. He or she wants to behave like each one of us here. He wants the same. So we wear an Apple smartwatch. He also wants a smartwatch. Maybe not an Apple, maybe 1100 rupees one. When I come to that, that means the opportunity. So where I'm pointing is that's the opportunity, and that's where I'm excited about. There is a segment who's going to adopt to all of this faster than others. However, it brings upon its own challenges, because there is a lack of there is literacy, there is lack of knowledge, there is lack of awareness. There are people who want to win faster. So like Sanjeev said, there is the concerns on this instrument being utilized. It's like a bank account. It is. Right? How do you utilize this instrument? How do you ring fence? Is not easy, and we'll go through our own set of learnings here. So that's going to be the biggest challenge that we will have in rural India.
Got it. Great. Great to hear. Ayan, any challenges? Anything over and above? I think the panel talked about anything that you would want to surface.
So I do believe that, like some of my friends here mentioned, it would be nice to get more of a level playing field, similar to a bank account. Right? We're very grateful that. Cash withdrawals have been permitted, the limits are higher, but there are certain things that a bank account can do that a PPI cannot. So just taking the example of UPI interoperability, we are still not permitted to be on the TPAP system, which would actually make it fully interoperable and discoverable. So I think that's one thing, and interoperability is a great initiative, and the interchange that has recently come on UPI is the best incentive. So interoperability being a great initiative, interchange being the best incentive to really kind of get it, to the bottom of the pyramid. And also, yes, if we can get the credit or dispersed onto these instruments, which was taking place in the past, in a more compliant and a regulated manner, That I think would be a great step for kind of democratizing the credits and digital payments moving forward. One additional very important thing that we could look at is something like KYC specifically for minors, because they are going to be the future of the country, and they really need to have to be able to use digital payments, kind of understand it, understand the risks associated with it, and how to kind of manage that life cycle. I think that would be very pertinent to focus on as well.
Great. I think you really moved to the next segue, I think, which is what I wanted to kind of get to. So I think when I started the journey with Airtel specifically, I think Airtel got the first mobile-based wallet PPI license way back in 2014, 2012. I think the problem statements were very similar, like financial inclusion was a big thing. I think that's the reason RBI kind of really institutionalized PPI license, because the banks, they wanted to kind of really get the non-banking ecosystem to start working on financial inclusion, get them. Problem seems to be similar in all of that. So, and of course, I think we all acknowledge that we've come a long way. I think from 10 million customers who were digitally savvy or digital payment savvy, we are now at 250 million. But of course, I think the large country is still remaining. So maybe I'll go around everyone so as to cover some of these hard-hitting messages. What are the key enablers that are still remaining, which we all think we need to do? I think, and maybe going back to you, like KYC you touched upon, and I think you just touched upon, like, say, minor KYC. Like, could you elaborate on your point on KYC? Like, what did you mean by, I think we touched upon onboarding as a challenge in multiple dimensions. Do you want to elaborate what do you mean by that?
Definitely. So I think it's a great step. We've come from an offline physical verification to various modes of online verification that are akin to physical verification, like VSIP and other methods. So that's wonderful. But I do think there are some use case specific KYCs that could be implemented. One could be for minors, another could be for transit, right? And other places where the user may not have that much time, or they may not have their PAN card or Aadhaar card readily available for them. So VSIP requires a very stable mobile internet connection. It requires your Aadhaar to be linked to your mobile number, which again is a barrier for a lot of people. A lot of people still don't have Aadhaar, whether you believe it or not. So I do think that use case specific KYCs could be a great way. Another point that I wanted to touch upon, which is the ask of the regulators and also would be really beneficial to the industry, is the implementation of SRO. So SRO stands for self-regulated organization. So what the government, what the regulators want is not to be policing us all the time, and I speak on behalf of the industry. They want us to kind of set those rules and standards amongst ourselves that we can adhere to, so that the job for the regulator is easier, as well as we are kind of governing ourselves in a more sustainable manner. So that's another thing that I think the industry could focus on, is the SRO.
Yeah, so I think the only point maybe, I think I also thought that the foreign nationals allowed to open PPI account, I think there is also a need for simplified KYC, because there's no virtual KYC option which is available, at least at this point in time. I think it's a big use case given the tourism in India. I think a lot of foreign nationals do travel, but they can't experience the power of UPI in absence of obviously being able to create very simplified accounts. So I think just to take your point forward, Ayan, I think use case based KYC, whether it is for minors, whether it is for transit as a use case, whether it is for foreign nationals being enabled to do digital transactions in India, digital payment transactions in India, I think those would be some of the ones that I think.
So just on the foreign national piece, there's additional regulatory license or department that comes into play, which is FEMA, right, the Foreign Exchange Management Act. So this is the first time I think the two licenses of PPI and AD2 or FFMC, or the two departments of Reserve Bank, which are the DPSS and the FED, have kind of come together to kind of launch something which is very progressive, and it's in line with the government and Modi ji's vision of displaying the prowess of UPI to the world. So yes, it would be wonderful if we can do it virtually, but we do have to consider the risk that comes in virtually onboarding of foreign nationals. So as it currently stands, there is a handshake required, which has to be physical. But yeah, if there was a way to kind of make sure the person is in India doing the foreign exchange transaction as per the FEMA norms, it would definitely help in onboarding more users and showcasing UPI to the world. Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So Kilan, we'll move to you. In the B2B world, where you're trying to enable PPI is through loyalty programs and all of that for businesses and consumer-centric businesses. What enablements, what changes need to happen?
I think overall, PPI over the last few years has getting a lot of push to, have 2FA mandatory, which is the right step from a security perspective. But at the same time, I think as Sanjeev and folks spoke about the user base being unique, right? And we're seeing the merchant user base being extremely unique as well. I think in general, there is a potential scope for simplifying the transaction flows, innovating on the form factors of authentication, as well as maybe relaxing it in some specific use cases, especially around loyalty, especially around gift card. I think these are use cases which are, potentially solvable without, adding additional intervention. So I think innovation around, how we could simplify authentication, and while a lot of technical declines in other form factors here, at least for certain specific use cases and personas and all, if we could minimize that, that will also help, scale and fast track, adoption of PPI in general, adoption of digital, payments in general. So I think that one friction is what if you could focus on for maybe not everything, because you want to balance, fraud, want to minimize fraud, which is I think the right step for overall, ecosystem. But I think overall maybe innovating in this direction could be helpful for the ecosystem, at least for businesses.
Sure. No, I think you make a very important point. I think with innovation comes the responsibility of managing both the regulatory trust as also the customer trust. And Sanjeev, I think we'll move to you. I think what do you think are the responsibilities as PPIs that we need to kind of take forward if we are going to address some of these new segments wherein building trust is super critical while providing simplicity of transactions? So any point of views there?
So I mean, building of the trust from the user standpoint predominantly comes from that that the entity who is providing, who is on the face of it, is licensed by the regulator of the country, and that's the primary level of trust which the user builds in, to my best of my experience. But in addition to that, I mean, the key elements still remains the same. That he trusts the people that is my money safe, right? Because in the PPI, the wallet, he's also keeping the money. So is it safe? Am I doing a safe transaction? And in case of any problem, am I properly being addressed? If all these kind of questions are properly solved by the entities and by the organizations, I think the customer trust is a process. It doesn't start from day one. It's unless and until you don't use it, the trust never gets built up. And I believe if these key elements by the service providers are properly being taken care of, I definitely see there is a significant trust as the volume itself talks about, right? I'll give you an example of a FASTag, which is again a case of a prepaid instrument. Today, close to around 58 million FASTag users are there, and everybody by default is using FASTags, and it is very well managed. We build trust if we see that the companies are offering and in the right spirit and right way.
I think in our connect, we were also talking about some risk management and prudent. Do you want to also touch upon that?
I think that's a key element of running any organization, and it's very much related to the trust factor, which actually is a result of building up a prudent risk management practices within the companies. Right from onboarding, I mean, while we are the users, we also recognize, and for the matter of fact, and let me tell you, in the rural areas, I come from a rural background, where I feel that the biggest trust starts with right from onboarding and the experience the company is giving it. Agar customer is identifying that everything is just happening without his consent or without his need, and I think then he never built that trust on any service provider. And that trust as a process gets evolved as you build, as he sees and experiences the prudent management practices being followed in terms of right onboarding of the customer, building up a right risk management practices. And one of the most critical risk management practices in the PPI industry, I'll say, and I have, to the best of my knowledge, and I have seen that, is that managing the limits of transactions, focusing focusing on reducing the fraudulent and spiky behaviors of transactions, and as well as mitigating, building the mitigating practices to resolve the customer queries is something I think will determine the success of the industry as well.
Thank you, thank you. Satyajit, any last points before we open it up for the audience?
Yeah, just to add to what Sanjeev was saying, I think PPI as an instrument can create value for other products. Okay, it can build a rich data where you can actually analyze the spending pattern of a consumer, and based on that, you can then offer him other products that need a credit analysis, or let's say if they don't have a credit history. I mean, PPI is something that can enable us to know how exactly the consumer is loading money, how they are spending, what type of transactions they are doing. I think that's what a PPI instrument can help the other products.
Cool. I think with that, we open up for the audience for questions. So we have 5 odd minutes. Any questions from the audience?
Somebody should throw us a question.
So please.
We'll just get your mic. It's coming in 10 seconds.
There are people here with a rural background and working rural areas. Why it's not working in rural areas, I do not know, but how can we make it work? The important thing is the cell phone. Nobody believed that 1 billion cell phones will be sold in India, or at least the billion chips will be sold in India. And all kinds of people have this cell phone. And I see people who use second hand, third hand, fourth hand cell phones. 200 रुपए में सेल फोन खरीद कर भी काम चला रहे हैं. How can we make them do that transaction through your UPI system, or in the large number where we can't say, and can't say that half the people are not using it. We should say 20% people are, 80% people are using. Anyone?
No, sir. Actually, very interesting, but sir, I have a very different hypothesis to this. मुझे लगता है लोगों को रूरल इंडिया में क्या हो रहा है पता ही नहीं है. तो आज अगर आप मतलब मैं इतने लोगों से मिला 2 years earlier and today when you go, you will see a QR code in practically every merchant, even in rural India. It just tells you how much it has changed, the ability to adopt a digital payment. So first, I think I'm starting with the first question of, is there an intent? And according to me, that has been solved. Intent is there. I think the answer to your point and the solution is exactly what I'm saying is, I think the intent has been solved. There's an infrastructure problem which is prohibiting the use of digital adoption more than the way it can be. And I think this is exactly the conversation. An instrument like this is, in my opinion, is an attempt to solve that. So I think hopefully in the next 2 years, if we are able to solve some bit of it, I'll be more than happy to tell you, sir, we started somewhere and yes, we are able to solve it. But the intent is there, sir.
So just to add to that, I think the network is also cognizant of this problem, and they are coming up with the technical solutions for the part of us who do not have smartphones, right? They are taking out that *#99 payments, the USSD based payments, so you don't need a smartphone to do a UPI transaction, as well as 123 Pay, right, which is a voice-enabled UPI-based transaction method that again does not require a smartphone, that can help in the onboarding process as well. So I think the network and the industry is cognizant of that problem, and we're trying to solve it for people who don't have the smartphones as well, right, or don't have internet connectivity. The second thing I do believe that we could do is tie up with the grassroots level schemes, programs that the government has, which includes the Anganwadi systems or the Poshan systems, where they have those centers in every village, every small city, and at the panchayat level, actually enabling that, and how the UNICEF, WHO, infant mortality rates and other kind of demographic problems from a health perspective were resolved by going to that level. If the government could join hands with the Reserve Bank as well as the NPCI network to actually disseminate that information, like my friend Sanjeev ji said, unko pata hi nahi hai that this exists, right? So to actually promote that information at the grassroots level with the support of the government through healthcare infrastructure education programs, I think that would also be a great initiative to actually get the 58% of India to transact digitally. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah. So can you please pass in the mic? Yes.
Yeah, my question is to the delegates there. Now with the rural India becoming more vibrant and becoming more into the urban, UPI usage is going to increase in rural India also. So do you think that there is going to be the same future which is there for PPI going forward in rural India, since UPI will take over that storm? And the use cases are there in both PPI and in UPI alone, platforms alone. So do you think that it is a way forward to scale up the business in PPI, or to look at something else and grow with UPI alone?
No, sir, let me answer. I think you're talking about UPI adoption increasing in rural India.
Yeah.
I think that's the point, and I'll answer this 100% yes. I think the way we are seeing it, UPI, if I were to just look at the instrument, Abhi UPI works on your bank account as an instrument. Now, the opportunity with PPI interoperability, there is a new instrument that's come in, which is PPI. And I think that should increase the digital adoption in rural India. So answer is yes, I think that is the opportunity that we are seeing.
Okay.
So I'll just add to Sanjeev. PPI, see today the UPI adoption to the extent it is available and being used is an account-to-account transfer, and especially what Sanjeev mentioned earlier is the safety aspect, because you know the hard-earned money of the life-saving money is there in the bank account, and linking it and making the payments for the UPI through the UPI transaction is a bit worrisome for the people in the rural areas, because their own money is residing only in a single account, and they normally operate only one single for the family as a whole. PPI brings an opportunity of safety for the users, and it's not only for the rural areas. We don't go into the rural divide and urban divide. The PPI on UPI, UPI on the PPI is a step forward of bringing more safe transactions, safe, smaller value transactions for our daily needs. You transfer from your hard-earned saving account, you transfer a small amount of money, a pool of money, and there's a single debit entry happening in your bank account. It is easy for your chartered accountant also to file the income tax and answer the income tax queries to be fair. And at the same time, it gives a limit of safety of that 5,000 rupees in case of any fraud activity or transferring happening. It will only happen to the extent of the transaction value being stored in. So I think it's a great opportunity for a smaller value transactions, which we do in our day-to-day life, and that's where I see I see UPI on PPI coming as an alternative to the TPAP way of transaction processing on the UPI ecosystem. I think it's a great opportunity for us, and it's a great enablement from the regulator as well as NPCI.
Any more questions? I think we had one question at the... okay.
I have a question with regard to CBDC. So when the UPI was launched, it was the fintechs who were actually able to take the UPI to every nation corner. And you guys being into the wallet business and CBDC also similar to the wallet business, do you think PPI issuers would be the next torch bearers for the CBDC down the line?
So quickly, just want to kind of talk about what CBDC is. And I think everybody is kind of confused about what CBDC is. CBDC is central bank digital currency. It's a initiative by the Reserve Bank to kind of be part of the blockchain ecosystem, which is separate from cryptocurrency. And think of CBDC very simply as you have a 100 rupee or a 500 rupee note in your wallet, right? In your pocket, you have a physical currency. It has a serial number to it. So imagine simply that in a digitized manner. Right now, the money that is in your bank account, it is not guaranteed by the Reserve Bank of India, unfortunately. The money that is in your wallet, physical currency notes, is backed by the Reserve Bank of India. So CBDC runs on that exact same concept. That digital money is in a specific denomination which starts from 50 paisa, I believe, 1 rupee, 10 rupee, 20, whatever. So that is what CBDC is. Currently, CBDCs have only been permitted for wholesale and retail use cases, along with scheduled commercial banks. So while there are talks of CBDCs being part of the PPI ecosystem, currently it is excluded from there. There's some very successful pilots happening across the country for CBDC, but currently not available for non-bank PPI issuers or bank PPI issuers for that matter. We do hope that it would come soon. But yeah, in a nutshell, CBDC is just the same 100 rupee note in your pocket, which is now a digital format and has a particular serial to it, and it's transferable. There's an open ledger for it. So yeah, very interesting about that as well.
Hi, my name is Chinmay Srivastav. I work with ISG. This is me. I have a question on interoperability of PPI using UPI. So we see UPI has championed the digital infrastructure for payments in terms of low cost or no cost payment mode. How do you think the levy of interchange rates on PPI, I mean the usage of PPI for UPI transfer, is going to add friction, or will it encourage the industry going forward?
So firstly, I think the biggest, like I said, the resurgence was PPI interoperability that started the whole thing. The recent regulations on the interchange on P2M, which allows an issuer to earn money on above 2,000 rupees, I think is a big enabler. I think it's too early to, according to me, I still see these as positive business economics to spearhead this opportunity of PPI. Too early to comment on the overall profitability on other payment instruments of PPI, so I'll reserve that comment. But as of now, we believe that from an economics perspective, it's pretty sound to do this business even today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have an interesting discussion and we can take a few more questions off stage. Thank you for joining us today.